Bartholomew Town, brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Navigant Credit Union, Half Street Group, and Newport Film.
Bartholomew Town.
I want to start with a statistic here. Wasted food is the most common item in Rhode Island's central landfill, with 100,000 tons entering the landfill each year. Yet 38% of the state's residents experience food insecurity, and the demand for food assistance has increased 9% in the past year. Each month, approximately 84,400 Rhode Islanders seek assistance at food pantries across the state. That's a fundamental tenet, and boy, it's almost a shocking statistic to see, because it illustrates the reality of a major disconnect that we have. So I guess, why don't you introduce our guest? Why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll get kind of into this conversation and the work you've been doing around food recovery.
Sure. And that was my not so fun fact that I was going to bring up about the landfill. So you beat me to the punch.
Uh-oh.
My name is Dara Benno. I am an artist and freelance designer. I do strategic design, and my focus is on human-centered or life-centered design and social impact and regenerative systems. So what that looks like is working with clients on creating sustainable products, but not just products, and circular models of production. I also work a lot in systems and community engaged practice. So I work a lot with local organizations and thinking about the systems that they're working within, be it food or otherwise, and really like taking a deep dive into figuring out if we're asking the right questions to identify the challenges that they're aiming to address.
So you have a master's in from RISD, I think you said in industrial design, and is that what brought you to Rhode Island originally?
It is. I moved from Brooklyn. I'm from Albany, New York, but I've moved around a bunch. And prior to Providence, I had been living in New York City, working in marketing. I had kind of pivoted from my backgrounds in sculpture and linguistics, and being an artist in New York is challenging, as you know, also as an artist, having lived in New York. So I was doing a lot of like product development and PR and marketing and that kind of thing. And I really wanted to get back to my creative practice. I was really introduced to the design world then. I was really lucky working for a designer in Brooklyn and having the opportunity to get to explore what true sustainable practice means, and working in like materiality and process, but also thinking about what that means for communities, and working with Mexican family workshops throughout Mexico, and what it means to develop ethical collaborations and that kind of a thing. So anyway, prior to COVID, I decided to apply to RISD for my master's in industrial design and got in. So I moved to Providence right before COVID started. And like I was just saying, it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because I got to kind of take that time to get back to my practice and figure out what it was that I really wanted to be doing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in fine arts and just really in creative practices in general found COVID to be this, obviously it's a massive international tragedy. And obviously we all understand that the world completely shifted in so many ways during that period. But there was also, I don't want to say an upside, but there was sort of a parallel thing happening where a lot of artists across the board use that moment to say, okay, let me reset, let me refocus, let me figure out exactly who I am, because I have the time, and really I don't have any excuse not to, unless obviously the mental taxation would be an excuse. But in terms of judgment from society, it was an opportunity to get to work.
And as a creative person and as an artist, I feel lucky that I had that outlet to be able to kind of attempt to at least process what was going on.
Yeah.
Like a lot of my work at that time was trying to process what it meant to be in isolation and that kind of a thing. So yeah, I agree.
Let's talk about your overall work on the whole, and just in terms of systems change. And then I want to zoom into food recovery and some of the work that's happening with URI and just that whole area in general. But systems changed, having that kind of impact, and the lens, the artistic lens to approach it with. Talk about that and what inspires you, and when you assess that broad notion of like the artist has a lane with which to have an impact that maybe no other practitioner can have in those areas.
Yeah. I'm really interested in exploring and examining that intersection of creative practice and complex systems. And I was fortunate enough to have a fellowship at Rhode at the Center for Complexity that unfortunately recently closed due to funding. But I was there for 2 years, really focusing on just that intersection and complex systems, including like anything to do with healthcare or the climate crisis, health equity, those kinds of things, a lot of work in harm reduction, and what you can do to, or what you can create, be it an experience or some sort of interaction or a product to help facilitate some sort of dialogue, or just critically think through some sort of issue. And there are so many different avenues and approaches to that, and lots of exploration to be done. So it's wide and varied. A lot of my personal focus in my own work is thinking about climate change and adaptation and how that affects our everyday lifestyles and the way that we live, and how people can live in a way where they're kind of expanding their mind and like accepting a reality, but also adapting in a way that feels comfortable. And I guess convenient for them. So it's not so scary. I know that it's scary in general, but it is the world that we're living in right now. So what can we do not only to prevent further harm, but also to adapt to what has already happened? So during my time at the Center for Complexity, I was thinking a lot about what value means today and what progress means today. And I just kept coming back to food and resources and how valuable those are. And I started getting ideas for different art pieces I wanted to make. And a lot of my practice is research. I would say like half my practice is research, and my design pieces and art pieces are heavily informed by that research and inspired by that research. So I really wanted to do a deep dive into food systems. I hadn't done that before. I've always been involved in community work and sustainable systems in New York. I was very involved with the New York City Fair Trade Coalition around sustainable fashion. And I always thought through, working in luxury furniture, like fast furniture and home goods and that kind of a thing. But I really wanted to focus on food. And I think I just came across the food recovery program on social media. I had been starting to get more involved with Zero Waste Providence and the green drinks events that Social Enterprise Greenhouse and Tess Feigenbaum host monthly, which are awesome. If people don't know about that, it's like a group of people that are involved in climate work or climate resiliency and community work get together just for like a happy hour once a month and just get to talk about what they're working on or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the algorithm knew that I was what I wanted, but
probably.
We're being watched all the time. I hate on social media, but that is one of the things that is good about it. It introduces me to different things that are going on locally, including these awesome organizations. So I think I just stumbled upon it and was like, oh, this looks perfect, because it's a model that is all about community-driven change, train the trainer, upskilling. I'm all about that kind of thing, and think it's really important to build resiliency in our communities today, especially when thinking about climate change.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, because I think a lot of people probably don't realize, even in their own lives, how much waste is actually occurring. And I think one area that is really fundamental that I've experienced, and I think I've seen people experience, is over preparation of food. And then you have what would be leftovers, but doesn't seem like it's enough to actually make a meal. So you throw it out and it just goes into the pit, if you will. And we waste a lot of food for a lot of different reasons. So I guess my question is, how do you, in your work now, how do you identify the root cause, the biggest cause of why we end up with so much waste, and what can be done about it?
Bartholomew Town.
Are you ready to take the next step in your career? At URI Online, they offer business and leadership-focused programs designed to fit your life. Whether your goal is to advance your career in fields like public administration, supply chain management, or training and development, their online programs provide the flexibility you need with a high-quality education you deserve. Learn more from experienced faculty and collaborate with a network of professionals, all from the comfort of your home or wherever life takes you. Visit uri.edu/online to explore programs and start building your future today. URI Online. Learn anywhere with us. Newport Film is celebrating 15 years of outdoor documentary film screenings every Thursday through August 28th. New critically acclaimed documentaries curated from Sundance, South by Southwest, and Tribeca screen at ever-changing, iconic outdoor locations across Newport and Aquidneck Island. A beloved summer tradition. Pack your blanket and lawn chair. Arrive early for free popcorn, live music, and filmmaker conversations. Head to newportfilm.com for all details. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Yeah. Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org. Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience, message, and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com.
Oh, there's so many things to say. First of all, I think it's important to take a pause and just observe your own behaviors and your own rituals and habits and routines, because everyone's, I'm assuming, just doing their best. And people are really busy and a lot of the time overwhelmed. And maybe you have a big family that you're caring for, and maybe you have more than one job, such as myself. Maybe we're hustling all around all the time, and you're not necessarily thinking about all the food scraps or all the food waste, or how you're going to make time to separate some food so that you can preserve it and it doesn't get wasted. I think that the food recovery program was a really good opportunity to just take that pause and look at your own practices, and then also have discussions with other people about what they do, just to kind of compare and see oh, that's a good strategy. What are strategies we can share with one another? And, just small assignments, take a week and just document the kinds of waste that you're throwing away. And then you're realizing oh, I didn't realize how much waste I was throwing away, maybe. And then maybe you make a small change with that. Maybe you even just start composting. Even myself, I grew up on a busy street in the city of Albany, and we didn't have a garden because both my parents worked full time. It was very hard. There were lots of rabbits that ate everything. They didn't know, And so we didn't compost either. I've always wanted to compost. I knew it was good. I didn't know exactly why I hadn't made that connection. And now I'm duh, I can't believe I didn't think through that. But it's so important to just have these conversations so that people connect the dots, that, it is shocking and alarming that the largest category of material in the landfill, not just Rhode Island, but I think across the nation, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure, is typically food waste. And that's preventable. So if we can do that small change as individuals and communities, the onus is not just on us, don't get me wrong, but that is something that we can do to not only prevent that food waste from rotting and turning into methane gas in the landfill, but creating soil that can be used in gardens and landscaping and for whatever. And also just freeing up that space in the landfill, because last fall, the landfill was at 290 acres. I think it's 390 or 360 is capacity, something like that. And once it's full, there's no other plan. So once a landfill is full, then you have to find a new landfill. No one wants a landfill in their backyard. So maybe that's in another state, at which point that needs to get shipped, at which point maybe your taxes increase. So there's just things we can do to slow down filling up the landfill. And that's just one of the things we focus on in that program. And like also just in general for myself, I've now been composting for a year, and there are so many resources around Providence to help people do that. I don't have an outdoor space here either where I live in an apartment, but I can do a drop-off program, or I can drop it off at the food co-op here, so for free. So there's like so many little things that I just started doing, and it was because I was like tasking myself with making those changes.
Yeah.
Second question, I already forgot.
That was a perfect answer. Sustainability is such an interesting discussion because we're in this moment now where it feels like a lot of the time when sustainability is talked about, at least there's some people, and maybe it's because I spend a decent amount of time, I do talk radio in the afternoon, so you get a wide swath of the public, but it almost feels like people get the sense that you're taking away something from them when you ask them to be thoughtful or sustainable. Not everybody, of course. I'm not saying that this is even necessarily a majority opinion, but that it's like, well, if you don't bother me, like, you know, I'm going to be gone anyway. So if the world melts down or we run out of space in the landfill, like, I don't want to be inconvenienced. I just want to toss my stuff in the garbage and go about my life. There's a lot of resistance to this type of conversation whether we're talking about energy, renewable energy, whether we're talking about transit, whether we're talking about, conversations around AI and sort of even as a vegan myself, there's certainly plenty of people who will make fun of me still. I had like an aunt make fun of me the other day that I hadn't seen in a while, it said that what I ate was weird. And I'm thinking like, you have like processed like junk food in your hand. So there's a mentality shift that needs to happen. Corporate culture and marketing has done a great job of convincing people that there's nothing to worry about. And every once in a while, a corporation will say, well, we're pro green or whatever. But how do we break that mindset where people say, I don't want to be inconvenienced. The future of the planet was actually the right thing to do. It's too much work, or it's too weird, or it's like, I'm not some kind of like hippie leftist, so leave me alone so I can go about my life. How do we change that narrative and make this into mainstream, basic conversation and basic action?
That question is really exciting for me because I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. And that's something that I did a lot of research around during my thesis work, actually, because you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about needing to make this mental shift. When you talk about adaptation, it's not just the actions you do, but it's your mindset. So there's a psychological adaptation component. And that can happen a lot through just a heightened awareness and conversations and people talking to one another about different things, just noticing new things, paying attention to new things. And I liked to use this example of like the masks, for example, during COVID, where in the beginning, it was like, oh my God, that person's wearing a mask, so weird. And I don't know if I'm going to wear it. I mean, I always wear a mask, but some people. Right. And then it was, people started to be like, okay, maybe we should. Then there was a mandate. Then, it wasn't just blue masks. Then it was like different colored masks. Then people started to make their own masks. Then fashion houses started to make masks that were really fashionable. And so it's kind of this like transition from something that's like unknown and weird and like maybe ugly and not part of something that someone identifies with or feels like they can express themselves through into something that they kind of accept and then turn into something of their own. So I think that through work and conversation and just what we're trying to do as a community, both in this program and just in the food recovery community around Rhode Island in particular, that is so strong, that will happen. And I think is starting to happen. Even maybe you start composting and you make a really cool compost bin and then you ritualize it. And then it's really exciting because you're like, you love your compost bin because it's so pretty. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's where the artist lens comes in as well. I think you nailed it as well by saying ritualizing it. That's really what it comes down to, is just normalizing and ritualizing this type of stuff. And it's not, it's not that much work either. I mean, I think a lot of people hear composting. I mean, you can go with like Harvest Cycle Compost or one of the other compost service providers in Providence and literally just have to throw your stuff in a bucket and bring it downstairs. It's actually probably making your overall life a little easier, because now the garbage bag you have to haul out to the dumpster or downstairs is less heavy and is less filled with, quasi rotting, now water or liquid, I should say, based trash. So it's not that big of a deal. And I think that's another message that's important. I want to talk about, obviously what we're talking about here, the URI Cooperative Extension Program. Course applications now open for the 6-week food recovery for Rhode Island program focused on food in the community, gaining skills in canning, pickling, dehydrating, and freezing the harvest, improving home composting, getting involved with community composting, rescuing surplus food, networking with inspiring organizations, and making changes at the grassroots level, and learning about employment, helping schools establish shared tables and compost sorting stations in their cafeteria. These are just some of the things URI is offering in this 6-week program. It's all common sense, and it's all kind of what we need to be doing as we move into the future. Your sort of take on recapping what I just said right there?
Sure. I also wanted to respond to something that you just said too.
Please.
Before that, which is about, it's really not that hard to start composting. It can seem like a big change for some people, because it's actively finding a new vessel to put things in, and then it's another step. And when you have like such a busy life and so many responsibilities, that can seem like a lot to add to it. I would say that it feels really good to drop off my compost. Like, I feel like I'm doing a good deed. Mm-hmm. So like, that's another thing that's like a boost of serotonin that like helps. It's like, when you volunteer, a lot of the time, like, isn't there some statistic that volunteers like tend to feel better like for themselves, and even if they're not actually like doing that much, the benefit is more like for them, because psychologically they're like, they think they're helping
right
so much or something like that. Don't quote me on that. Delete that from the video.
Yeah, let's see. I'll give it to you. There are actually many well-documented statistics on that. 76% of volunteers say that volunteering has made them feel healthier. 78% say yes, volunteering lowers their stress levels. And older adults who volunteer often have lower rates of high blood pressure and yes, improved cognitive functioning. So you're spot on.
Yes. And I will say there was something else you said about, when people talk about sustainability, and I try to really not use that word because it's kind of like buzzwordy, and it can mean so many different things or just kind of be meaningless at this point. Sure. But if people think that, acting sustainably, if we're using that word today, take something away from them, when you're doing these like food recovery practices, it actually is adding to what you have. Because, for example, one of the things you can do when you're cooking is like save your food scraps and then boil them down to create broth. And so then you're like having something that you wouldn't have had before. You don't have to buy it. You can make a ton of broth from like onion skin and kale cores and mushroom stems and things like that, and freeze it. So there are just so many different things you can do. And I'm really into the food preservation side of things. And you brought up like all the different facets of the food recovery program. And that was like so exciting to me, because I just always wanted to learn how to can and pickle things. And now I'm obsessed with pickling, and like last holidays just made everyone pickled vegetables.
Yeah, I can see the pickles coming in mass. That's yes, for sure.
And we have so many amazing farmers markets here in Rhode Island, and like fresh produce, so you can pickle local and fresh things so easily. And, what this program offers is like different tracks. And I'm someone that just wants to like learn how to do everything, and I want to do all the tracks. So I remember emailing, the directors of the program being like, is it possible to do them all?
Right.
So I'm like trying to like learn as much as I can and do as much as I can during the program, which is very doable, by the way, because it's mostly asynchronous. So you can do it at night, you can work during the day, and it's like, 5 hours in 1 week of of work time, depending on how much you want to invest.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can focus on school tracks. You can do like a focus on your own practices at home. Or you can just like specifically focus on composting. I don't have, like I said, I don't have like an outdoor space here to get my hands dirty in composting. So I didn't choose that track, although I did go to the field sessions, which are another component of the program that are really fun. It's essentially field trips to local organizations where you get to do that project-based learning or applied learning at their facility or at their farm or whatever that may be. So that there are a lot of opportunities to go to different composting facilities and learn about that. I kind of steered more towards the school and educational track. I do a lot of like reuse workshops and visiting artist workshops. So I incorporate that knowledge into what I do. In fact, RISD has this incredible nature lab. I'm not sure if you've ever gone.
I have. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. You can do a lot of like
awesome.
cool experimentation, and they have a lot of awesome resources there. So I was experimenting with some of their biomaterial recipes and did a workshop with some students in the Lower East Side of New York all about like bioplastic and bioconcrete, and had collected oyster and mussel shells from Dune Brothers here in Providence. They were fantastic. Sure. Shout out to them. They like took the time to separate the shells, and then I collected them all, ground them down at the nature lab, brought them to New York, and we all made this bioconcrete and experimented with that together. So even incorporating, food waste and practices into those workshops is like a fun thing for me. So that was like something I wanted to focus on with the school track. And then the home track, I was, like I said, really interested in the like food preservation side of things. Yeah. Since then, I've been working with the Rhode Island School Recycling Project, which is one of the big partners that we have. They do one of the programs that you mentioned, which is implementing composting programs and introducing these programs to different schools, elementary and middle schools, and hopefully soon high schools around Rhode Island. They're awesome. If you don't know them, you should check out their website. But they have free resources, like open source ways of maybe starting something yourself, or you can work with them to help start the program at the school. And we're working together to even think about not just sorting after the students are done eating and figuring out what goes in the landfill, what goes in the compost, what goes in the recycling, and maybe preventing even more from going in the landfill later, and maybe talking to the school about how they can change certain things so that there isn't as much plastic or whatever that may be. But really thinking through how we can prevent food waste even before it hits the tray. So
that's a big piece.
So much happening, so much exciting stuff going on.
Yeah. I mean, the conversation, there's so much to have to look into, and so much to think about. Obviously, a future with pure regenerative farming, pure local food, and all of that would be ideal and utopian. We're not even close to being able to implement that on a societal basis. But there are things you can do in your life, and this program, things that you can do in your life that will dramatically move us in the right direction. This program really helps. Clearly, it is available to help people understand what's going on. Last area I want to talk about here. Appreciate your time a lot, but you mentioned New York. When I was an artist there, and I used to work these. Well, at the beginning of my time there, I was a temp. You get these weird jobs like, hey, you're in for someone who's on maternity leave as like the receptionist or the executive assistant or whatever. A lot of it was a nightmare because it was bored. A lot of it, I just used the time to book tours and things like that. But I had this one job at a hedge fund, and it was like 10 hours a day. I had to go sit there at a desk. I don't even know why they had the job. I don't think that there was any real reason for it. Basically did nothing. But one thing that was included in this was every day at 11 o'clock, somebody would call in a lunch order for the whole company. Here comes today, it's Mexican. Oh, here comes, we got this, we got that. And, here comes the truck with the yogurts and this. And they'd bring in a huge, essentially lunch. I don't want to say buffet, but they would provide lunch for like 100 people. Now, of course, this is a ruse. The idea is, well, isn't this so great? I'm so immersed in my, bankrupting the world through my hedge fund work that, that rather than having the inconvenience of having to like actually go outside and breathe in fresh air and take some time for myself, my wonderful boss has provided me with lunch. And sometimes, by the way, this included dinner as well on certain nights. They'd bring out like a cart with alcohol and stuff. But so I would see this and go, yeah, I am out of here during lunch. I am not going to fall victim to this stupidity of being trapped inside this building, like, which is what it was. It was just a way, it was a gimmick to get people to work harder under the ruse of we're taking care of you. But here's what happened every single day. It would be like the Serengeti stampede as, you know, finance bros and other people who worked at this would kind of race into the facility, grab their plate, right, here we go. And then they'd race back to their table to continue, you know, trying to widen the wealth gap in the world. And at the end of the day, there'd be an enormous amount of leftover food, oftentimes trays untouched, unopened. And so I was sitting there with nothing to do. And I was thinking, how do I take this food and deliver it to unhoused people, food insecure people, whoever? And the litigious nature of this company, and by law, you could not do anything with that food. It had to be thrown out by law because obviously there are risks with foodborne illness. We understand that. But in other words, I think there's a lot of corporate waste that happens. I see this all the time at meetings. Oh, hell, hey, come on in. You know, here's a spread of bagels and fruit and this, that, and the other. Nobody's really touching it. I think the culture of over supplying food in meetings and other scenarios is something we've got to change, because at least in my life, I've seen an enormous amount of irrevocable waste taking place. Your thoughts?
I mean, you're absolutely right. And it's because they don't want you to leave the office, you know, like that's a part of capitalism. You're supposed to work, and never leave. And we'll give you food. Don't worry. We'll even give you a drink if you stay till 10 p.m.
Exactly.
It's just like, I think that especially in New York, it's hard to be like, no, and slow down, because then you might get fired and that you need to support yourself. So it's like, it's tricky because we're caught in these systems that you're forced to kind of do and behave in certain ways. And when I go back to New York frequently, and like, I do see a lot more trash, maybe because there's just a lot more people and trash is on the street and that kind of a thing. But it is harder to slow down and take those moments of pause to reflect. But I feel like if you're in an office environment and you kind of like hold a meeting and kind of talk to your colleagues about just that, maybe changing those practices, or maybe even supporting a local caterer for those kinds of things, and trying to start using reusable containers or something like that. Like, there are small things maybe that people can do together as a community, but we have to like support each other through that. If one person in an office says like, I'm not going to eat lunch today because of this, then maybe everyone else will just be like, fine, go do your thing. I have a lot of work to do, you know? But again, that like, the little fact from the landfill is just so alarming that I honestly think that everyone should visit their landfills, their local landfill. That was actually a really fun field trip, by the way. Everyone should go visit the landfill. They're very cool there. They have an excellent website. And if you're unsure about what you can recycle and what you can't, there are different tools on their website too. But yeah, there are like little things that you can do to also like just inspire yourself and just take the initiative. Maybe even go with some friends, make it a day trip, and then go to the beach.
Make it a date. Anything's possible these these trying times.
Yeah.
Hey, why not? Dara, thanks. This is it. Welcome to reality here. I mean, everything is spinning out of control anyway. So why not have your first date if you meet somebody on an app? Take them to the landfill. That's my message to America right now. Oh, Dara, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And your work and for highlighting this great program URI is offering.
Thanks so much.
Bartholomew Town is a truly independent news organization, accredited by Lion, the leading consortium of independent news providers in the country. And we certainly thank our sponsors, Newport Film, the University of Rhode Island Online, Navigant Credit Union, Half Street Group, and many others who have helped sustain our journalism. And we also thank our listeners who have supported us at patreon.com/BartholomewTown, or you can click the little heart wherever you're listening right now. For as little as $3 per month, you too can help sustain independent journalism in Rhode Island.